Okay, so I wanted to do something just a tad different this time because I had what I think is a relevant insight into our conversation. But just to start off with a Gemara in Chulin, in the seventh parak of Chulin. So there's a series of Agadatas regarding Yaakov Avinu and his experience running away from Esav, and he sees this. He sees this vision of the ladder, and there's many symbolic layers in that whole interaction. So one of the things that the Gemara says is the following: "V'hinei malachei Elohim olim v'yordi bo," that there are these angels of God that are going up and down. They're going up and down the ladder. So says the Gemara: "Olim v'roim b'diyukno shel Yaakov shechakuk kisei hakavod." They see the image of Yaakov, which is sketched into the throne of glory. The Yardim umistaklim b'panav shel Yaakov, and then they go down and see that they see the face of the actual physical Yaakov in the world. They're going up and down, and the implication is that they're surprised that there's a resonance between the face of Yaakov, the earthly Yaakov, and the face which appears on the throne of glory. You could say, by the way, that the face on the throne of glory, it's not for sure, but it's kind of implied that the face on the throne of glory is a reference to a vision that we see later on in history in Yechezkel, that the chariot, this divine structure, this spiritual structure, has four sides, and each one of them has the face on it, and one of the faces is the face of a man. So whose face is it exactly? It's not just a man. It's referring to Yaakov's face specifically. And also, in fact, there are other places in the Talmud that equate the looks of Yaakov, the physical image of Yaakov, to the physical image of Adam HaRishon. There's a connection there. So anyways, be that as it may, what is the message that's being given over here? The symbolism of this interaction of the angels that are going up, and they see Yaakov's face up above, and they see Yaakov's face down below. It's talking about this schism, this fundamental schism that exists in reality between the idealism and realism, meaning the ideal form of something as it can be imagined and as it can be formed in the mind and the heart, and the real embodied version of the thing as it appears in the real world. And there's always a distance between those things, right? The plant, right? It's kind of like in its depths, the man plans, God laughs theme is that there's an ideal that the outcome never exactly matches that ideal. However, what's being alluded to in this story, in this midrash, is that the Olim B'Yordim is saying that the angels were able to identify that there was actually a similarity, that the divine ideal was in fact being embodied in the material, real world Yaakov Avinu. And it's this idea which comes out very strongly in Os Ayin, which we talked about in the regular flow of Aleph Beis, and now we're talking about specifically how the Ayin functions as one of the tools to be within the world of Hagbalah, the world of constriction and constraint and boundary, but at the same time to peer into the world of the infinite. So we can take a quick review of the Os Ayin itself. So in Os Ayin, Rav Kook says the following. We'll just do a very, very brief. So
why do they have to keep checking? Why have to keep checking?
What do you mean keep checking?
Did I see right? Let me go back one more time.
Right. It says a perpetual going back out, right, going up and forth. Meaning they're shocked. They have to make sure that they saw right, that their eyes were playing tricks on them. So in the actual Os Ayin itself, Rav Kook highlights these themes that the Ayin essentially has two sides of the structure. It has the Vav side, which is the right-hand side, and on the left-hand side, it's a Zion. So the theme that Rav Kook brought out is that the Ayin, which is the eye, which is the thing that takes in the information in the world and thereby allows engagement in the world, the two primary forces that are required for this is the Vav and the Zion. At the time, we discussed how the Vav and the Zion are opposite forces. They're literally the opposite, even in their names. Vav is a hook, which implies connection, communion, and Zion is weapon, strong, protective, defensive, being on guard. Yeah. So both of these forces come together and they create this new letter. So he says, in order to be able to commune with the world properly, you need both the yearning to connect, which is the Vav, and both the willingness to be on defense and guard. And he also talks about the two ideas, which this idea is really the other side of the coin of the first idea, in that there's two types of seeing. One is the inner seeing, which is focusing on what the ideal version of the thing is, right? What we conjure up in our mind and heart of what the ideal image should look like, and then seeing out into the world of what is actually manifesting itself. We brought a very powerful source from the Malbim, giving his commentary on Yeshayahu, Perek Membez, the famous pasuk "Kol Tzofayich Nasnu Kol," that the voice of the prophets will give forth. This is referring to the experience of the final redemption, that the prophets will give forth their voice, ki ayin ba'ayin yiru b'shuv Hashem Tzion, ayin ba'ayin, which literally means an eye to an eye will see when God brings back the remnants of Zion. So that term, ki ayin ba'ayin, is a euphemism that appears a few times in the Tanakh. And the simple understanding is that it's very clear. It's like two people facing each other, and each one is looking at each other directly in the face. There's a very, very clear face-to-face interaction. But at the deeper level, ayin ba'ayin, it's talking about two layers of seeing. One is the internal seeing, and one is the actual seeing. Says the Malbim, until that point, all the prophets, they saw the final redemption with the inner eye. They saw it in their ideal. They were receiving it from God, this picture of this ideal situation. Everything's going to be great, and all the exile is going to come back, and it's going to be world peace, and everything's going to be wonderful. But now they're actually seeing it in the world. They're seeing it with their external eye. And there's a resonance between those two things, meaning what they're actually seeing in the real world, manifesting itself, is actually embodying that vision that they had. Ayin ba'ayin, the inner eye and the external eye. So,
you're saying that everything was confirmed for them. I mean, it's almost comforting to hear, because so many of the, especially whatever it's talking about, the end of time and all that is so elusive and so confusing. It's almost comforting to hear that that's the inner eye, but we don't know. But that's not reality. You won't get to the reality until you get there. But you're saying that everything was confirmed. Their conceptualization of what it would be. They saw that it, even though it didn't happen yet, they saw that it will conform to what they.
It's a bit confusing what you're saying. Okay. I feel like there's like a few points that you're.
Right. Well, you just said
that you're saying. You're saying that your impression of Yemos HaMashiach was that it wasn't going to be clear, that it was going to be.
Although it seems purposely obtuse when you read all different sources. They don't say the same thing. They contradict. You don't even know there's symbolism. You don't really know what's going on. But it's so comforting to think, okay, so that's their inner eye.
I see what you're saying. You're saying there's an ambiguity to prophecies that deal with the final redemption. Yes, that's something important to highlight. That strengthens the very point. Meaning, the vision that they're receiving is inherently ambiguous. Meaning, there's certainly positive vibes that come to the prophet when he's looking at the final redemption. Like, clearly this is a good thing, but the exact way in which it's going to look like and manifest itself is not necessarily clear, right? So they get to the point where they had the experience of the inner eye, which was this very high, lofty experience, but not necessarily so clear what it was going to look like. And now they're looking at the external eye in the world and seeing how it's going to be. I'll add another layer to what you just said. There's clearly an idea that when the final redemption comes, it's going to be done in such a way where it's going to extinguish all doubt of what it is that we're talking about, right? Like in Yeshayahu, I think the single most famous verse that highlights this is V'yimoleh haaretz de'as Hashem kamayim layam mechasim. At that point, the knowledge of God is just going to fill the earth, just like the water covers the sea. It's not going to be. There's not going to be any conversation anymore. It's just going to be clear. It's like having a conversation what color the sky is. It's like it's not up for a question anymore. Yeah. So there's a very powerful teaching of the Arizal that makes a diuk on that pasuk, kamayim layam mechasim, that it's going to be like the ocean covers the sea, and this is actually a point that's important to understand, I think, with Kook's message. How does the ocean cover the sea, or the water cover the sea? The water covers the sea equally, meaning the ocean is at the same level in all places, the top. but its depth varies from place to place. There are some places in the ocean that are very shallow, some places that are very deep. I think the deepest place on Earth, somewhere in the Indo-Pacific, is like 8 miles to the bottom. It's like extremely deep. It could be shallow, the shallow shore, and then 8 miles to the bottom. So he says that's the difference. It's going to be universal. There's going to be a universal awareness of Hashem. It's true, but to the extent that the depth is going to vary, depending on the individual. Right, the depth is going to be different. So that's right. So what we're saying over here is the ayin, right? The power of the eye to have a resonance, the ability to have a resonance between the ideal of what we experience as the ideal within and the experience of the external world. The ability to have a resonance with that is a skill to develop, meaning the ability to see the ideal in what's actually manifesting itself is a skill. That, right? The angels, they have that skill, so to speak. They're able to go and see Yaakov. They see Yaakov's face. It's like, oh, this is actually an embodiment of what we saw on the throne of glory. Yeah. And there's also levels to this. A source that's coming to mind right now is the first interaction that Shmuel has with David. In fact, it's the only interaction in the Tanakh that we have recorded of Shmuel and David. It's the least, the only interaction that they exchange anything. That Shmuel comes to the house of Yishai and he's looking at all of Yishai's sons because he's told that one of Yishai's sons, he's going to be the king. So he's looking at them and he sees Ahaliah, right? He sees David's brothers and he sees one guy. He's like, he's really tall, he's really good looking. He says, oh, this is for sure the guy. So God says, no, he's not him. Kima astiu, I've rejected him. Right? Right? Ki ha'adam yirah le'einayim, man sees with the eyes, v'Hashem yirah le'levav, and God sees to the heart. And you think about, who are you talking about? You're not talking about some guy. You're talking about Shmuel, the prophet. Even the prophet, with his power of discernment, he misidentified the true essence of what he was confronting. So there's different levels of this, right? Shmuel understood that the ideal of the Messiah of God, the ideal leader of the Jewish people. He had that vision. But so now he's looking in the world, okay, where is the proper candidate? And he identifies someone, and God says, no, he's not it. That's not actually an embodiment of the ideal. You think it is, but I'm telling you it's not. Yeah. So Chazal say that he was punished for anger, which we find out later in the story that this particular brother had an issue with anger. When David comes to the battleground near Beit Shemesh to see what's going on, so his older brother gets angry. He says, "Oh, you left the sheep unguarded because you just want to see the action, and like you're an irresponsible little kid." So we see that this
was also punished for not having that clarity at that time. Something he did or said was presumptuous, and God said so.
Could be. I don't know. So with that introduction, we'll get to the Os Ayin as it appears in the section of the Tagim. So says Rav Kook, Hariyah mitnotzetzes, and I want to finish this quickly because I really wanted to share something with everyone that I thought of in Parshas Vayera. So it says Rav Kook, Hariyah mitnotzetzes. The vision that emerges, like light emerges, the sparks of light emerge, hamigalemet et zaarea musagim, that cause the concepts to coalesce, the bright concepts to coalesce, umetzivatam betochiyut hanefesh, and they become fully formed and present inside the soul, pnima, lemazgam achar kach b'tzura idealit, to become fully integrated in their ideal form. So again, the ideal vision of what the thing is supposed to, quote unquote, look like is being formed within the soul. It's being formed with the inner eye of the soul. Mechubarot im yesod hachayim, they are attached to the foundations of life. V'or hadeya, and the light of consciousness. V'haskala ha'elyona, and the sublime inquiring or intellect. Im hagbala hamyuchedat asher la, with the unique boundaries that it has. Vision has unique boundaries, as we know. I mean, the first thing that uniquely characterizes the boundaries of vision is that you can only look at one thing at once. It's not like hearing, where you can hear multiple things coming in from multiple directions, but sight is very laser focused. Like you can only see in front of you, right? Except for with the exceptions of third grade teachers who have eyes in the back of their head. Normal people, they're only able to see one thing at once. So it's a powerful way of receiving information, very clear. You can only see one thing at once, which is why it can cause confusion, which Kook will get to in a moment. It's uniquely able to cause confusion. Your eyes can play tricks on you because of the fact that it's so powerful, because it's so detailed. Im hechreach hishtamshuta betzlalim l'shem tior haorot. What is unique about vision is that it uses shadow in order to describe the light. This is right, throwing back to a concept that we've come across a few times, and the idea of the white and black fire that forms the Torah, right? As the Midrash Tanchuma tells us, right? Eish shachar al gabe eish levana. The Torah was written with black fire and white fire because the black fire accentuates the white fire. The shadow accentuates the light. Harehi yoneket et atzmuta merom. Harehi yoneket et otzmata. It draws down its strength. Mirum olam, from the sublime worlds. Shel riyat kol ata el roi, from the seer of all, meaning God, as it refers to God in the pasuk in Parashas Vayera, ata el roi, you are the God that sees. Shel ha'abata habihira, what is this referring to? The look of God, meaning the action that God takes, see that He looks at the world. It is completely clear. Asher ein ima machashakim. There are no shadows. There's no darkness in the vision of God. The hariyah el-yonah idealit, this ideal form of vision, hatzipiyah hakolelet va'achoderet, which is a looking that is completely all-encompassing. It's all-encompassing. Asher hatochen shel ha'ara misof ha'olam bi'ad sofo, afel hu legabea, which even the description of seeing from one end of the world to the other is like darkness compared to it. Right, this term that Chazal use very often to describe seeing from one end of the world to the other, like Adam HaRishon was able to see from with the Or HaGanuz, which was in the world for a day and a half. He was able to see with that hidden light from one end of the world to the other. So God's vision is even more than that. It's like a riyah kolelet. The closest thing to this, you can get like an inkling of what this might be like, is today you have on cameras the panoramic vision. You can take a panoramic picture, meaning you can see it once in one shot, so to speak, more than you're able to see with just looking. It's like you incorporate your peripheral vision into something, right, that you're just looking at straight. But that's what it's like. It's totally counterintuitive. It almost doesn't make sense. What does that mean? A riyah kolelet. You're literally seeing everything at once. That doesn't jive with our even to imagine such a thing. To be able to look at an object. If you think about, you can imagine any object, right? A coffee cup. Okay, take a coffee mug. You can imagine looking at the handle of the mug and the bottom of the mug and the inside of the mug and the logo on the side of the mug, but you can't imagine looking at all of those things at once. Maybe you can imagine like little screenshots, like arranged in your mind. But to see all of those things at once is not possible. But that is the riyah of God. That is how God sees. When it says that God sees the world, El Roi, He is the power of sight. Harehi sholachat et kavea la'ametz et hayesod ha'ni. It sends out its lines, so to speak, meaning its channels of interaction, which form the foundation of the ayin-like foundation. Milchemet hariyah, so the war of vision. What is the war of vision? The Zion element of the ayin. Right? The two sides of the ayin, one is the vav, one is the Zion. So there's the war. There's the aggressive side of the Zion. The sfigat tavniot, the teorim mutzagim bechazyon mugbal, which deal with the fact that it is interacting with teorim, with descriptions that are very constrained. Right? Vision, as we said a moment ago, vision is unique in that it's very, very constrained. You're looking only at one thing at once, and it's very difficult, if not impossible, to incorporate multiple visions into one moment of contemplation. Hauset sisa pnima, which causes the internal, let's say, machinations of the heart and mind to start working. Right, it gets the gears turning, so to speak. Al yidei hakoach hamitromeim mima'al l'chol ha'arachim halalu, through the force that is sublime, which stands above all of these particular categories. Hamareh et ha'orim b'mechikat ha'torim, which allows the lights to shine by erasing all of the descriptive elements, the kul hatachanim hamugbalim, and the digesting of all of the different attributes that are constricted. Okay, bishvirat kol hatziurim, by breaking all of the descriptions, habaim yisodam shel hashkafot hachushiot hamatot, that come as a product of all of the interactions of the senses that can be mat'eh, that can cause a mistake. Mat'eh means to mislead. So what is he saying here? He's saying that taking in the world with our senses is by definition taking the world in a piecemeal fashion. And there's no more powerful experience than vision, because as we keep on saying, vision is very much piecemeal. You're taking snapshots of the world with your vision. So the war of vision, the Zion element, the war is to come and break the compartmentalization of each snapshot, the conception the conception that each snapshot is its own particular thing and has no relation to the other snapshots. That needs to be broken. It's a tool that we can develop to break this idea that each snapshot is distinct in and of itself, to be able to integrate all the snapshots together. Livnot al charvotem shamayim chadasha va'aretz chadasha, to build a new heaven and a new earth. That's a paraphrase of a pasuk at the end of Yeshayahu, the Shamayim HaChadashim, the new heavens and the new earth. The Haim Zayinei Ha'ayin. This is the Zion of the Ayin, right? The war of the Ayin is to break the conception that each piece of information, each piece of data that we get from the senses is a standalone piece of data and cannot be integrated with the others. Hamutzavim biyachad b'tchuna hazayinit shelo, that stands strong with its Zion-like strength. So Rav Kook is saying two things. First of all, we'll start from the end. The first aspect of the ayin that requires this jump into the miraculous, or into the dimension of the infinite, which is the tagim. The tagim, again, the tagim represent the crowns. They represent an ascent into the world beyond compartmentalized form. So the first aspect of the ayin that requires this jump to the sublime level is the ability to integrate all the different snapshots, all the different frames we see with our eyes, to be able to integrate them and understand that there's a collective, cohesive picture, right? To come closer to the view of God, so to speak, that God sees the world, all the snapshots are together. So it's impossible for a human being to achieve that to full extent, but at least conceptually to be able to view the world with all the different snapshots together. A good analyst is able to do that, by the way. You see people. I remember a certain particular incident right after we got out of Gaza in the first round. Sorry, these are coming back to me as I'm speaking. The guys are sitting in the tents. They're looking at snapshots from the drones all day long. So they could be looking at 1,000 pictures. God knows how many pictures they're looking at. But they see them all together, and then at the end of the day, they're able to create some type of cohesive picture based on every single one of the pictures that they saw. This changed over here. That house didn't look like that before. Clearly, someone moved over here. Or people were moving through there. They're able to build this whole story, piecemealing together all the little snapshots. So that is the breaking of the barriers that separate each snapshot is the war of the ayin. It's the Zion of the ayin. So that's the first concept, right? You need to go to ascend to the domain of the infinite, to break down the barriers that separate things. That's the first idea of the ayin, vis-a-vis the tag, vis-a-vis the crown. And the other aspect is the first point that we brought up, which is the ideal versus the manifested, or the idealism versus the realism. To be able to see within the manifested reality, the actual concrete reality, to see the embodiment of the ideal. Or put slightly differently, to experience the ideal through the thing that's actually there and being manifested. Meaning, Yaakov Avinu was born, he was born a regular kid. He went through all of the different. He experienced many of the challenges that we experience also, and had a whole growth. Right? The Medrash Tanchuma, I think, talks about how Esav and Yaakov, they were basically the same until age 15, and then they, each one took a turn, right? So they had their stages of development, and Yaakov certainly had his challenges, as we know, right? Difficulties with deceit, difficulties with his family, but with all of that journey that he had, he eventually was able to be the embodiment of the ideal that stood on the throne of God, right? His face was etched into the throne of God. So his life wasn't pretty. It wasn't pretty. And it got very ugly sometimes, right, to put it lightly. But in the end of the day, he was able to embody the ideal. So I just wanted to share with everyone a thought that came to me as I was preparing for this discussion. So the Kook references this pasuk, which is in Parshas Vayera, Ata El Roi. Who's saying that? Ata El Roi. Who says that pasuk? Who says that line? That's Hagar. Hagar, after she was banished by Abraham, Ishmael and Hagar are banished into the desert. So it looks like they're all going to die from thirst. It's not a pretty situation. And Malach comes and shows them where the well is, and they're saved. So Hagar praises God and says, Ata El Roi, you are the God that I saw. Right? So I'm just reading from the pasuk over here. I want to compare very quickly two stories that appear in Parshas Vayera. First of all, right off the bat, the running theme from the very beginning of the parsha until the end is seeing. That's the theme. I mean, it's called Parshas Vayera, see. Why is it called Parshas Vayera? Because in the very beginning, Avram is sitting at his tent, right? Vayar elav Hashem be'elamei mamrei. That God appeared to him. He was seen by Avram. God made himself seen to Avram. That's the very first pasuk. Vayisa einav vayar, and then Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw. What did he see? He sees these three figures, right? People, angels, or something, right? Whether it's a profession or the actual real life people. We shouldn't discuss that, but the point is that from the very beginning, it's God making himself seen, and then Abraham seeing something. So this theme runs all the way through. When Abraham is given the commandment by God to banish these people from his home, so it says the following: Vayashkem Avraham baboker. Avraham wakes up early in the morning. He takes bread and he takes water. He gives it to them. And they run out of water. And Hagar prays to God to be saved. Vayishmael him is called Hanar. God hears the tefillah of Yishmael and sends an angel to go and give instruction to Hagar. So says the angel, Kumi si'es hanar v'achziki es yadech bo. Pick up the child, pick up the boy. Ki logoy gadol asimenu. I'm going to make sure that he becomes a great nation. Yeah. So Hagar says, Ata El Roi. She praises God and says, You are the God that appeared to me. Hagam halom ra'iti achrei roi. Even after the first time that I saw. Rashi explains the first time that she saw, referring to when she was still in Abraham's house. Because in Abraham's house, you were always seeing God. You were seeing God all the time. You're always having revelations of God. But even now that I'm here in the desert by myself, so I'm still having revelations of God. Okay. Next story. What's the next story that appears right after the story of this banishment of Hagar and Ishmael? The Akedah. Okay? Abraham receives another commandment regarding another one of his children. He says you have to take your child, bring him to the land of Moriah, and offer him up as a sacrifice. The same language. Huh? Well, he does say El Eretz HaMoriah. He does tell him more or less where he's going, kind of. Vayashkem Avraham baboker. Again, Abraham wakes up early in the morning. Same language. Okay, and he takes his gear with him, right? In the same way that he took the bread and the water to escort Hagar and Ishmael. So now he's taking the wood and the sacrifice, the wood and the wood and the knife, and right to go do his thing. Huh? He takes two. Well, in addition to Yitzchak, he takes two Na'arim. Correct. He takes them. So we all know the story. Abraham is ready to sacrifice his son. The angel comes in at the last minute. The other appearance of the angel, meaning just like an angel saved Yishmael in the previous story, now an angel comes to save Yitzchak in this story. Okay. So says Avraham. Sorry. Vayisa Avraham es einav. Avraham lifts up his eyes. Again, this is like mirroring the first story in the thing, in the parsha. The first time Avraham lifts up his eyes and sees. At the end of the parsha, he lifts up his eyes and sees. There's another. There's a replacement sacrifice that's in the bush, and he goes and sacrifices that instead of his son. Vayikra Avraham Shem Hamakomahu. What does Avraham call that place? Hashem Yireh, the place where you see God. Asher Ya'amer Hayom Bahar Hashem Yireh. That we say about this place today, in the mountain of God, we will. So there's God seeing. There's seeing God. Hashem Yireh. Asher Ya'amer Hayom Bahar Hashem Yireh. That we will be seen. When do we say that? By the way, when do we say Bahar Hashem Yireh? It says that we say today Bahar Hashem Yireh. What's the context in which we say that? It says today we say Bahar Hashem Yireh. When do we say that? And all of the regular, right? Yireh kol zechorecha et pnei Hashem Elokecha. You will be seen by God when you visit this place, right? Like we literally say that today. Bahar Hashem Yireh. What is the idea of the Yireh, of the Yira, the seeing God on the mountain and the being seen on the mountain? There's one more clue which I actually skipped over. There's one other context in which this word Yireh or Yireh is used in this parasha. There's one conversation between Abraham and Yitzchak in the entire Torah, and it's over here when they're walking up the mountain, and Yitzchak says to his father, Vayomer Yitzchak al Abraham Avi, Vayomer Avi, Vayomer Hineni Beni. He says, "Here I am, my son. What do you want to know?" Vayomer Hinei ha'esh v'haitzim. Vayaseh lo. We have the fire and we have the wood. But where's the carbon? Where's the actual sacrifice? Vayomer Abraham, and Abraham says to him, Elohim yireh lo haseh. What does that mean? God will see for him. It literally means yireh lo. Literally is translated, God will see for him the sacrifice. What does that mean? Yireh lo. It's such a strange way of saying that. In context, yireh lo means God will choose. God will choose the sacrifice. So there's this very, very subtle yet powerful layer of meaning in this term, when it says that this is the place that God sees and that we are seen. It means that God is choosing. That when you go to this place and you make yourself seen by God, you're experiencing the choosing of God, the fact that God chose Avraham Avinu and by extension chose you. Right? This is explicit in the language of Chazal how they describe that place. What is the terminology that Chazal used to describe the Beis HaMikdash? Beis HaBechira. Okay, Beis HaBechira does not mean the chosen house. Doesn't mean that. If that would be the connotation, it would be Habayit HaNivchar. Nivchar means chosen. Okay, Beit HaBechira means the house of the choosing. The house of the choosing. The choosing of what? The choosing of the Jewish people. When you go to this place, you experience the fact that God chose you. That's why you go there. Beit HaBechira. Beit HaBechira. So the seeing of God, this is very, very powerful. This is the Riyah HaMetzumtzemet. This is the narrow vision, right? Rav Kook talks about, he's oscillating between the Klali vision, the all-encompassing vision, the Zion of the ayin, the powerful weapon of the os ayin. It comes and it breaks down all the barriers between the snapshots, so that we can have this, all-encompassing, integrated picture. That's because that's the vision of God, right? The vision of God is El Roi. He sees everything all at once. However, this is the narrow and constrained seeing. Choosing, by definition, is exclusivity. It means that you're chosen, not everything else. It's just you. It's the constrained vision. It's the constrained vision. You see how it's an incredible contrast. The Roi, the El Roi of Hagar, in her story, when she's banished, she's referring to God as the God that sees everything. You see the whole world, right? Everything is in your span of vision. Abraham's experience of vision is the Riyah Metzumtzemet, is the constrained vision, that God is only Kabayachol seeing him. I only have eyes for you, right? To use the idiom, right? It's the constrained vision, And this is the idea that the constrained vision of seeing the particulated, embodied thing is the expression of this big picture ideal. That the Riyah Mitzumtzemet, the constrained vision, and the big klali vision of the internal experience have a symmetry between them, right? And this is not just a right, a theological or a physical or a philosophical commentary. This is talking about a skill that can be developed. Just like the angels, they're able to go and up and down the ladder and see the ideal image of Yaakov Avinu as it is right, engraved into the throne of glory, and see how that ideal is actually embodied within Yaakov. So too, we as individuals can develop this power of sight to be able to experience the ideal in every interaction that we have. The culmination of world history, you could say, is ayin ba'ayin yiru, that the prophets will get to a place where they're able to see the ideal being embodied in what's in front of them. And that, it's a very, very Rav Kook idea. It's extremely Rav Kook idea, and we see that there are stages to this development, because things can become more and more manifested, more and more embodied, and to the extent that our eyes are purified, right, and our eyes are strengthened, perhaps we have the ability to see more and more. And this is the secret of the very well-known, famous story of Rabbi Akiva, as it appears in the end of Maseches Makos. He's walking with his colleagues, and they all come to Harat Sofim. People often they miss the important parts of the story. The first part of the story is they're all walking along Jerusalem. This is after the destruction. Rabbi Akiva lived after the destruction of the temple. So they're all walking together. People didn't live in Jerusalem. Jerusalem was off limits. Jerusalem was Judenrein. All the Jews were kicked out. So they're walking along the path. Kevan she'igiu latzofim. Once they got to where? The place where you see. Sofim. Harat Sofim means the place where you see. So once they get to that place, karu bigdeim. They all tore their garments. Rabbi Akiva also. They all tore their garments. That's the halacha. Right? Before we came back here, anyone who saw Jerusalem, not the Temple Mount, you saw Jerusalem, you tore your garments. This is a halacha which, thank God, isn't applicable today. That if you see the cities of Judea in their state of destruction, you rend your garments. Says the Beis Yosef, what does that mean in a state of destruction? That there is no Jewish control of this place. As long as Judea, Yehuda, is being controlled by it's under occupation by the non-Jews, it's considered destroyed. If you see those cities, you have to rend your garments. Thank God, it's not applicable anymore today. Right? Harabais is a different story. So once they got to the Mount Scopus and they saw, they all rended their garments. They all tore their clothing in expression of avelus, an expression of mourning. Now they go up to the Temple Mount. They go up to the actual Temple Mount, and they see a fox coming out of the ruins of the Holy of Holies. Okay, so they all are crying. They're all just beside themselves. And Rabbi Akiva, he starts laughing. And he says, and now that I see that this prophecy has come true, I know that all the other prophecies are also going to come true. So that was the vision of Rabbi Akiva. He didn't deny what he was seeing. He rended his garments too. He's sitting there with torn clothing. He rended his garments in a state of mourning. But at the same time, he sees the ideal in a state of potential, beginning to blossom, beginning to come. That's the ayin ba'ayin, being able to see the ideal in potential and being more embodied until it becomes to its fullest state of actualization. The ayin ba'ayin. This is the sublime level of the ayin, to being able to discern that, and in turn being able to experience it, and then being able to shine that experience out to others, being able to give that over. Right? It's a unique capacity of the Jewish people that we've spent many, many long centuries being able to develop, and this is, in fact, something that we have in our spiritual genes.
I have a question. I don't know if this seeing applies or not. There was very unusual Medrash Rabbi came across in Vayishlach, where talking about the conundrum of after Dinah was raped by Shpem, that he truly loved her. And
it implies that, yeah. It says
right.
so, yeah.
It's usually like the case of unknown Tamar. It's usually the opposite.
Right, usually the opposite.
You're disgusted with your act of violence and you hate her. You want to go away. But so the Medrash says that this is how you find God's love of the Jewish people, by looking at this incident. And Medrash even asks, "You look at this Russia and you find, yeah, that's right. All the terms of endearment that we have psukim of God loving the Jewish people, are all found in how
Shechem related to her.
Shechem loved her." I was wondering, is that the kind of seeing also, that you can look at some, negative, violent act and
I
say,
have,
"Wow, I
so
see
I have a,
God's love of the Jewish people in here." From
so
this.
so
But I don't. Doesn't matter where it is. But I'm seeing it.
So I have a very very different take on what the
Okay.
Midrash is trying to say over there.
Okay.
It's actually it's a bit dark. Meaning, I think that it's really I think it's the opposite. I think that what it's saying is that it's showing the schizophrenic relationship that the Umas Ha'olam have with the Jewish people. That on the one hand, they are our enemies and they hate us and they attack us and they commit violence against us, but at the same time they have this strange love and admiration at the same time. Which there's no other incident that more powerfully accentuates that than the whole Shechem and Dinah thing. Heard about someone where she was kidnapped and done horrible violence to her, but for some reason he's like attached to the point that he's willing to undergo circumcision and make his whole population undergo circumcision. There's like this very strange, bizarre, like love-hate type of thing going on.
Plainly says that this is where we find the terms of endearment.
No, what the Midrash is trying to say, it's like a Kal V'chomer type situation. If the non-Jews who hate and despise the Jewish people and are willing to commit horrible acts of violence against the Jewish people, yet still they can't escape their admiration of the Jewish people, so all the more so for God, who naturally has that connection with us. And
even though we are not so responsive in our connection to Him, He still loves us. Perhaps I think that's
a whole other problem, as we say. Right, the love in a relationship is determined by the lowest common denominator. Right, if a guy loves a woman and the woman only likes the guy, are they in a love relationship or a like relationship? The answer is they're in a like relationship. So if God loves us infinitely and we love Him, 5.5, maybe a 6 on a good day, so are we in an infinite love relationship or a 6 relationship? The answer is a 6. So we're always going to be the one to turn, right? That's why, right? We pray. It's so easy to overlook the words, right? We pray every day. We pray that our love for the Creator should be somewhat akin, right? V'tein b'libeinu, give us in our hearts la'ava liyira shemecha, because we're not able to. We're just like we're flesh and blood. Our hearts have very limited capacity, right? La'avdecha b'levav shalem, with a full heart, completely full, like not bounded and constricted in the ways that we do, right? You, God, are not bounded by our constraints. So give us a little bit of that. You created our constraints, so help us overcome those constraints. That our love should be without constraints.
I saw it more positive. I saw it since because of this conundrum of Him loving her after all psychological would expect Him to hate her. So God, who has all reason to hate us the way we treat Him, God says, look at that conundrum, and that's my model. I love you unconditionally in a crazy situation, just like He did. But my question was, is that seeing things in unusual places, like Rabbi Akiva did, is that part of the seeing? I mean, the fact that the Medrash could look at this and see something positive. That's what I'm saying.
I understood. I thought you were talking about from Shechem's perspective. You're talking about from the sages who are analyzing the story. Yes, I get that. Yeah, looking at a story that's extremely dark and horrible, and being able to extract that lesson from that. Yes, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a good example.